On Thursday, AC Milan star Zlatan Ibrahimovic criticized LeBron and other star athletes, saying it was a mistake and doesn't look good when athletes or other famous people get involved in politics. Here's LeBron James responding to those comments.
He was the same guy who said when he was back in Sweden, talking about the same things, because his last name wasn't a certain last name, that he felt like it was some racism going on when he was out on the pitch. I speak from a very educated mind. So I'm kind of the wrong guy to actually go at, because I do my homework. You know, I would never shut up about things that's wrong. I preach about my people, and I preach about, equality, social injustice, racism, systematic voting, voter suppression, things that go on in our community.
All right, Big Perk joining us now for this discussion. Kendrick, great to have you. Stephen A., I'm going to start with you. Do you like, love, or hate LeBron's rebuttal to Zlatan?
I like it. I don't love it. And the reason why I don't love it is that I thought LeBron should have went at him harder. I love the fact that LeBron pointed out his hypocrisy, how this was the same guy who did speak about his name and racist connotations that came along with it, and how he was being prejudiced against in the past. But yet when it came to LeBron James and others, he's speaking about how, folks need to speak to sports. I think that what he was saying, he should have been more specific. He was basically trying to say the black athlete should stick to sports. That's how I took it. And essentially, what are you meaning by that? Because you have a lot of people in this world who look at black men and believe, instead of showing them the deference and respect that they've earned and they deserve, and giving them major props for that, as opposed to doing that, they feel like these athletes should be appreciative and should never feel entitled because of what they've earned. And so you do have a lot of folks out in this world that look at black men who are particularly influential and incredibly powerful, and they feel they should stay in a certain place. They should be more appreciative as opposed to feeling deserving and things of that nature. And I think this shows that, the kind of prejudice that we're accustomed to experiencing as black men, it doesn't just exist in America. I've had the fortune of, particularly with Stephen A.'s world, of interviewing several people on my show from different other parts of this world, and they talk about how the black experience itself is the black experience. It ain't just in America. It's the world over. And so to me, this is the latest example of that. And I loved how LeBron came back and responded, but I also thought that LeBron was very classy and far too nice compared to what he could have been by an individual that was basically not only telling him to just shut up and play basketball, but he was also an individual that was telling him, you shouldn't be the one doing it, but evidently I could, because when I had an issue, I certainly brought it up, and it didn't have anything to do with the field of play. So it's okay for me to speak on things, but you should know your place. That's how I took it. I think that's how LeBron James took it. And LeBron handled it with the deference, the class, the decorum that obviously nobody can argue with. I'm just saying, if it were me, I'd have been a hell of a lot harsher.
I love LeBron James's response. You like it, Stephen A., because you think he could have gone harder at Zlatan? I love LeBron's response precisely because he didn't. Because I look, Zlatan's entitled to his opinion, even if we think it's wrong-headed. Now, Stephen A., if you read into it and say, what are you really saying? I get it. But actually, LeBron's measured response, just stating the facts, I think was the most effective possible response. And look what he said. It's on the bottom of the screen. There's no way I would ever just stick to sports. The operative word is because I understand this platform and how powerful my voice is. In other words, if you want to talk about a moral responsibility, if you are a member of an oppressed group historically, then LeBron feels it. That's great. That's great that he responded the way he did. He is not making ad hominem attacks at Zlatan, although he points out, hey, look, you were saying kind of similar stuff where you're from, right? Like you were saying, hey, my last name, whatever else, led to behavior toward me that I didn't like. And what's curious, by the way, LeBron could have gone on. I've heard interviews where, one interview in particular, where Zlatan was asked about Muhammad Ali. And immediately, he's like playing word association. Immediately, he says, the best, the greatest, my idol. And Zlatan is, loud and he celebrates himself the way Ali did. But if Ali's your idol, it's not just because he bragged a lot. It's because Ali stood up for what he believed in and stood for his people and oppression and oppressed groups everywhere, really, by the end of his career. So it is curious that Zlatan has that point of view about Muhammad Ali, had that point of view about himself in Europe, but then has this point of view about LeBron. And LeBron's response to me is pitch perfect. I don't think it could be any better. No ad hominem attack, points out a hypocrisy, says, hey, wait a minute, why is that okay for you, but not okay for me? And most importantly, reinforces the idea that he feels a responsibility to do it. Not just that whether, well, I can do it or I should just stay in my lane. No, LeBron saying I have a responsibility given my platform. Pitch perfect, I have to say, as usual by LeBron.
No, Max, I have to disagree, and that's nonsense. Ain't nothing was pitch perfect about that response. And matter of fact, I hated the response that LeBron James gave, and here's why. He should have addressed Zlatan or whatever his name is, like the numbers on the house, and should have made him smell his cologne in that response. And by me saying that, because it's not about politics. It's not that LeBron James speaks out about politics. He's speaking out about humanity. All right, this is what we're talking about, humanity. What's going on in the black community these days? That's what LeBron James stands for. Growing up in Akron, Ohio, coming up really without a father figure in his life, knowing why the purpose why he opened up a I Promise school and wanted to provide such great people to help these kids in these black communities so they could get knowledge, so they could get up out of those communities and be something in life. Because we go through so much that it get overlooked. Okay, and what I'm not about to sit up here and stand for is no athlete or no other person, especially from another country, tell one of our powerful, iconic figures how to speak up and how to be a black man in America and be a leader in America. I'm not about to tolerate it. And LeBron should have addressed him like the numbers on the house, like I said before, because look, we deal with so much oppression for over 400 plus years. You talk about things to nature where father figures were incarcerated for whatever reason and getting football numbers where they're not there in their children's lives nowadays, and now they need powerful, iconic figures like LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, Dwayne Wade, Maya Moore, all these beautiful athletes that have been standing on the front line to make sure that these kids get the best opportunity that others are getting around the world. So I don't want to hear that, man. At the end of the day, to me, I thought it was nonsense for him to lash out at LeBron. I thought he was clout chasing, and LeBron took it too lightly on him.
I agree with you. I think LeBron took it too lightly on him. But Max, to get back to what you're saying, Zlatan and how he tried to approach the matter. Listen, he was wrong off the bat. Because nobody should, and anybody that has a voice, particularly a voice is intelligent and as even keel and as thoughtful as LeBron James, should speak out on what the hell he wants to speak out about, because he's not coming from a perspective of ignorance and being misinformed or ill-informed about anything. That's number one. But number two, and more importantly, where this elevates the conversation to another level, is that this guy, this soccer player, okay, he spoke out when he felt like speaking out in terms of what his name connotated and how he felt he was treated because of it. He spoke out. So to me, it really, really resonated because, so it's okay for you to speak when you want to. But this brother right here, who is one of the most accomplished athletes in American history and who's been an activist in some respects, and has been well known, and it's been well documented what LeBron is as a businessman, what his contributions have been to his community and beyond, what his contribution has been to America and beyond. Oh, excuse me. He's the one that you're going to sit up there and say, him nor any of these athletes, they shouldn't be speaking out. They should just be quiet and play. When you didn't do it, it says to me, you were saying, listen, You're a black man. You should be appreciative of what you have. Shut the hell up and go on about your business and just play. That, to me, is how I took what he said. And I don't think a tepid response was called for in that regard. I think it needed to be more formal. I'm not complaining about LeBron. Don't get me wrong. Everybody's got to be themselves. Please don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, if it were me, I'd have went all up in that, brother. I would have been making international headlines today, directed at that dude for taking that position.
Look,
Yes,
I think you know me, and if I see injustice, and we've done it on this show, I'll go at people. So I agree, there is a time for that. I think in this case, Zlatan is making a slightly different point than you think he's making. And while you may disagree with it, if you react immediately and emotionally to it, you'll never have the conversation. And this is what he's saying. What he said specifically is that people should stay in their lane. In this case, he was talking about politics specifically. Now, there's a huge overlap between social justice issues and politics, obviously, but they're not exactly the same thing. And while I agree with both of you, I think all three of us agree that how can you really stay out of politics, particularly in this country? There's enormous overlap, and especially in this last election year and what's gone on in this country over the last 4 years in particular. How do you stay out of politics and address these social issues? I don't know that Zlatan was talking about not touching social issues. He was talking about not touching politics. He is wrongheaded, I believe, for thinking, because in fact, in that same interview that I saw where he talked about Ali, he said he was asked about a certain political figure that we talked a lot about in the last 4 years, and he said what his comment one was nothing. In other words, if you ask him about a social issue, maybe he'll comment. But if you ask him about a political figure or politics specifically, he won't. We all may say that's wrongheaded. Here's why. In fact, no, you're wrong about LeBron James. Here's why. And that's what LeBron did. LeBron essentially addressed the point. But if you immediately have the knee-jerk angry reaction and don't actually listen to what was said and respond, then we just have a lot of shouting. Then we can be righteously indignant because there's plenty to be indignant about. But in fact, he was actually saying, in a way, you're conflating social issues and politics. My response to him is, what do you mean conflating? Oftentimes, there's such an overlap, they're basically the same. And LeBron must discuss politics at times if he wants to address social issues.
Well, Max, politics has to come into play when we talk about in social justice, because the only way that we're going to have change is by getting certain people in office to make change, right? That's the only way we're going to stop having cops kneel on black folks' necks for 8 minutes. That's the only way we're going to stop having black folks being shot in the back by police officers, is by forming groups like More Than a Vote. So politics do come into play when it comes to a certain point of it. So, but my thing is this: you cannot, I don't care who you is, whether you think it's politics or it's social justice. If somebody is fighting for the right cause and somebody is being the voice for so many that can't speak out and can't be heard, and they're doing a great job in the community and being a powerful leader, I don't care who you are. You cannot tell that person to be quiet and shut up and dribble, because that's basically what he was saying to LeBron James. So whether LeBron James talk about politics or involved in politics and social justice, whatever the case may be, he's doing the right thing. And for a guy that does not even live in the United States of America, he cannot tell a black man how to be a black man in America, period.
Max Kellerman, let me get back to what you were saying a little bit earlier. A couple of points that needed to be addressed. Number one, I'm not shouting now. So let's be very, very clear about that. Nobody's shouting now. Number two, when you talk about drawing a line between politics and social issues, my comeback to that, Max Kellerman, is that I find it very, very interesting that those who disseminate messages towards other people want to dictate how it's received and responded to. That's one of the biggest problems that we have that exist in this nation. People want to run their mouths and speak and talk and say things, but then they want to complain at the same time about how it's received when you're talking about the other person. And what I'm saying is that I get your point about listening to the person and making sure you understand directly where they're coming from. But I would make an argument to you. You don't know definitively that that's where he was coming from. You can deduce it based on he's saying, and you could reach that conclusion, but you don't know definitively. So your interpretation of what he was trying to say may not be wrong, but neither might mine.
I'd like
It might not be the case
to that
with
point.
Kendrick. I'm getting to it. My point to you is that you can't definitively say it, neither can I. And so now it comes back to who's the offended party. You have this black athlete who is without question a iconic figure with global cachet. And you're saying to him, you don't need to be speaking. Just play and ignore what's transpiring in your community. Ignore what's transpiring in your nation. While at the same time, you made sure to highlight what you wanted to highlight that transcended beyond the field of play, Zlatan. That's what you did. So your words weren't consistent. They were applicable to you, but they shouldn't be applicable to LeBron James, which is somebody like myself and Kendrick Perkins come in and we say, wait a damn minute, who the hell you think you are? Because there's no consistency. Now, if you took what he said in a vacuum, Max, and you never took into account what he did for himself, you have a stronger point. But when you take into account what he did for himself and how you got a problem if LeBron James does it for himself, there's an inconsistency there, and it's wrong. It's not wrong for us to deduce why that might be.
Okay, I actually took notes on what you said because you made several points. I want to respond to them. I'll try to do it quickly. Sure. Number one, you're right. I don't know definitively. That's why you find out. You ask questions. You find out the follow-up, and you get more definitive answers. And I think if what you feel is that righteous indignation and respond emotionally, you won't ask the questions. You won't find out. I think we're all the poorer for it, number one. Number two, LeBron is the offended party here. And LeBron responded the way he felt was appropriate. And LeBron's sense of how to publicly respond to people is among the best I've ever seen. And I think that it was quite effective in this case. Number three, Zlatan, I agree with you guys that if this is his answer, look, I stayed out of politics. I mentioned social prejudices and stuff, but I stayed out of politics. And that's what I'm saying to LeBron or whoever else. Stay out of politics. That's a different field. That's different than saying, hey, I feel discriminated against in this community. That's kind of social activism versus politics. And I think reasonable people would tell him, look, you really can't do that. It's really not possible to genuinely try to respond to these issues, particularly Kendrick Perkins, as you mentioned, in this country, particularly around issues that affect African Americans, and not get into politics. But already now we're having a conversation about it. And by the way, if he turns out to be hard-headed and wrong-headed and stubborn and insulting about it, well, okay, then you may respond in kind, but I don't think we're there yet. He simply said he's into politics. I stay out of politics. He should too. That's basically what he said. I disagree, but I don't think he needs to be castigated publicly for it.
Yeah, but Max, whether it's politics and social justice, racism, whatever the case may be, the world that we living in, and especially in our country right now, you can't tell nobody what the hell to say or how to speak on any damn thing, because if we have a powerful leader like LeBron James that's speaking out for so many and trying to do and get what's right and make sure that everybody have civil rights, whether that's voter suppression, whether that's making sure kids make it out of the hood, whether that's making sure that kids be able to see their father again because they're sentencing for a drug epidemic was handed out in football numbers. It don't matter what it is he's speaking out about. The world that we living in, you should be able to speak out on whatever the hell you want to. Now, I would never speak out on politics because I'm not educated enough to do that. But LeBron James is educated. He's very educated to speak on any level. And I think as a leader and what he has shown us throughout his career, he has the right to speak out on whatever the hell he feel like it. And who is this guy in a whole nother country to tell his African-American brother what he can and cannot speak on? That's the problem I have.
You're right. Just a dude with an opinion, and it's wrongheaded.
Yeah, but we're
Really
responding.
strong, Kendrick. Really,
Hold
really
on.
strong.
Hold on. What we're doing, Max, is we're responding to LeBron's response to it all.
Yep.
And we're not chastising LeBron in any way. What we're saying is that it transcends just LeBron. It speaks to blackness as well, because we don't believe that those kind of words would have been articulated to somebody of a different hue, from a different culture. We don't believe that. We don't believe that Tom Brady would have ever been told to shut up and play football, or Drew Brees, or Larry Bird, or somebody. We believe those kind of things are reserved for us, because on far too many occasions, particularly when it comes to black excellence, people are more apt to believe that we should feel privileged. We should feel lucky and thankful grateful as opposed to individuals who actually earned the positions that we are in. That's why you see Kendrick Perkins and myself responding the way that we responded, because we've seen that kind of language emanating from people who don't look like us on many occasions.
I get it, and I no doubt, and I feel likewise. My point is here, think about LeBron's response. He said, I'm never going to just stick to sports. I'm educated on these issues. I also found out about you. You spoke on a similar issue, and I have essentially a moral responsibility given my platform. That's right. That's the right message to get across. Right. Not just bad.
It's an incredible discussion, but Max, you're a different race than Stephen A. and Kendrick, so you might just feel differently just based on that alone, that you could never walk in their shoes, so fully understand. So even if you think it's right, they might not believe it's right. Because again,
I feel right
the racial difference right there.
Molly, I feel